Hi, this is Chris, and today we're going to do an introduction to fresh pasta. I'm going to show you a couple different ways to make sauce and also two different types of pasta. So let's get right down to it. We're going to start off with the pasta sauce, and because there are no fresh tomatoes, we are going to start off with some fresh olive oil. There we go. And to that oil, I'm going to add some fresh carrots. And the way I'm going to slice these carrots up is into about 1/2-inch pieces, and I'm going to do what's called a roll cut. You can see what I'm doing is I'm cutting the carrot at about a 45-degree angle and giving a quarter roll each time. And what that does is it exposes more of the interior of the carrot to cook. So we'll soften those carrots up for a minute or so. Just give that a quick stir. All right. And to that, I'm going to add some onions. So I've got a medium-sized onion here, and I'm going to cut that into about 1/2-inch size pieces. And you can use other vegetables as well. Celery works really well. If you have some celery, peppers will work well, but you know, just your favorite vegetable. And just cut those up. Alright, smells good already. Alright, so instead of adding lots of other spices, I'm going to do a little bit of a shortcut, and I'm going to add some Italian sausage. And this is Johnsonville, which is available locally. And you can get a sweet sausage and you can get a hot sausage. I like the hot sausage, so that's what I'm going to use. So those carrots, they've softened up in the olive oil. And we'll just drop this right in. Let's make sure we don't put the paper in. And we'll just rake this up. Let that brown up. Probably take, 5 minutes or so for that to happen. And what's nice is the sausage will give us the flavor, and it will also render some of the fat from the sausage. Will add some flavor to the sauce as well. All right, so let me talk a little bit about the tomatoes. So if this were tomato season, if we're into late June, July, and August, and we had fresh tomatoes, what I would suggest is that you would go to your local farmer's market and buy some fresh tomatoes, and I would just puree them up right up in the food processor. I would not peel them because the lycopene, that's something that's healthy in the tomatoes, is actually in the skin. And I know that traditionally you would peel the tomatoes because you didn't want them to kind of be in the sauce. But if you puree them up or chop them up, the skin gets broken up and it works pretty well. But if it's not tomato season, the next best thing is to get fresh canned tomatoes. And you can get them chopped, you can get them pureed, you can get them crushed. I'm going to use pureed tomatoes today, and that's because the pureed tomatoes will cook up into sauce fastest. So we'll just put those right in. The sausage is now all browned up. The vegetables are nice and soft. We'll give that a stir. And what's nice about the pureed tomato is that that will stay thickened up. If we had just used chopped tomatoes or crushed tomatoes, it wouldn't be this thick. So this just gets thick really fast. So that works really well. So what I'll do now is I'm going to put this on medium. There we go. And we're going to just let this cook up while we are making our pasta. And by the time we're done with our pasta, this will be ready. It's already cooked now. We're just combining the flavors, and we're going to actually let it get a little thicker as the liquid evaporates. And one other thing that I'm going to add is I'm going to add to this just a little bit of vodka, probably like 1/4 cup. Remembering that most of the, or actually all of the alcohol will have cooked off. There we go. I'll just stir that in, and that'll give it a nice flavor. So we've got a nice meat, tomato, vodka sauce that's going here. All right. So let's move over and let's talk about our pasta. So to make fresh pasta, what I like to use is 1 egg. This is a large egg. And a little less than 1 cup of flour. This is pretty simple. What I'll do is put in most of the flour. And I do that so that if I need to add more flour, it's easy to do. It's easier to add flour than it is to add liquid. And I'm not exact in my measurements simply because there's so many nuances between the type of flour and the size of the egg, what have you. The texture that you're going to be looking for in the flour is couscous. So you want small pellets. And what we'll do is just process that. It happens pretty quickly. Let me just give my sauce a little stir here. So here you can see the texture. You can see the small pellets, and when I press this together, it stays together and it forms a dough. So this is just about the right texture. So let me take this out. There we go. I can hear my sauce cooking over there. I'm going to slow it down a little bit. All right, so we'll pull this out. And when I pull this out, what I need to be able to do is to gather that and press it into a soft ball of dough, which is nice and soft and smooth. It doesn't crack when I squeeze it, when I knead it, but it doesn't stick to my hands either. So that's what you want. So that's regular plain dough. It's pretty easy. So let me, I'm going to put this, I'm going to cover this. I'm just going to let it rest over here in a covered bowl. In this case, I'll just use 2 bowls and I'll cover that. And let me show you, that was one type of pasta. And I'm going to show you how we do another type of pasta. And this one is going to be spinach pasta. And what we want to do with the spinach pasta is we'll just take a handful of spinach. If you really like spinach, add more. There you go. And we'll take, in this instance, we're going to take a full cup of flour. And we're going to process this before we put the egg in. And the reason you want to do that is that you want to process the spinach dry, because if it's wet, it doesn't actually mix it into the flour. It'll shred it rather than mix it. So you can see what's happened is that the spinach is actually being incorporated right into the flour. So what we know is that the spinach has a fair amount of moisture. So for a given amount of flour and an egg, you're going to be able to make more dough with the spinach because the spinach adds more liquid. So let's put this egg in. And we'll process this. And it's likely that there's going to be too much liquid. And you'll know that because it forms a ball. You see the ball that is formed? That tells us the dough is too wet. All right, so this is really sticky. If I tried to knead this, it would stick to my hands. So I'm going to put in maybe a tablespoon. And I want to make sure I don't add too much flour at one time, because if I add too much flour, I'll have to add more water. Then before you know it, we'll have 20 pounds of dough. But what this will do is it will start to break that ball up. We'll go again. And as you do this more often, you'll get a sense of how much to put in there. So you can see that ball. It'll break up and then it'll form again. So now we're getting a little bit full for the processor. So I'm going to take about half of that out. Now I'm going to put in another tablespoon. And the spinach pasta takes a little bit longer to process because as the leaves get broken down, they release more moisture. So you just want to let this go a little bit longer. Maybe one more here. There we go. That ball doesn't want to break up, does it? But you can kind of see the couscous, but there's still this wet ball here that I want to break up. And the reason you want to make sure you break that up is that if you try to put this through your pasta machine or you try to roll it out, it's going to be too sticky. So pasta dough is actually a pretty dry dough. It's still soft, but it's definitely a drier dough. Okay, that's good. There's that kind of couscous texture. And then as I pull this out and give it a squeeze, it forms that nice soft dough that is dry enough so that it's not sticking to my hands, but it's very soft. And I'll show you in a minute, but this is made, that handful of spinach had enough liquid when added with the egg. I think it's probably made almost twice as much dough as when I made it with the plain dough. So let's put this in, let's make the rest of this. Let's see how wet this is and sticky. So let's put in a couple tablespoons. And there's our couscous again. So we'll pull this out. All right, I won't try to pull all this out. Don't want to cut my fingers here. All right. So it's a good idea to let the dough rest a little bit, because what will happen is that resting with the flour interacting with the moisture will actually let more gluten form, and it'll be a softer dough. So we'll just let that rest under here. Another little trick is that if you can plan ahead, take the eggs out of the refrigerator so that they can warm up a little bit. The warmer the liquid is, the faster the gluten will form. Whereas if it's cold, it's not going to form as quickly. So let's take a look at our sauce here. That's looking pretty yummy. It's tempting to eat it now, but we'll hold off. So let's talk a little bit about our water here. So we've got some water boiling here. What we're going to do is we're going to heavily salt this water. You'll notice I did not put salt in the pasta dough. I certainly could have, and it would be tasty. But what I generally like to do is I like to salt the water. And I'd probably put in a tablespoon of water there. probably into 3 quarts of water. So that's nice and salty. And that salt will give the pasta some extra flavor. The other thing just that I want to mention here is you do not want to add oil to the water. Adding oil to the water is it's an old wives' tale. I always feel bad for the wives, the old wives, but it's a misconception that if you put oil in the water, the pasta won't stick. And what really makes the pasta not stick is when you put it in, if you just give it a little bit of a stir for the first 5 seconds, the hot water seals the surface of the pasta. If the pasta is touching when it seals, that's what makes it stick. So have enough water so you can move it around, and then make sure you actually do move it around. So let's make some pasta. So here's the plain pasta that we made. You can see it's nice and soft and smooth. So I'm going to take about a golf ball size. Let me just put this back in here so it doesn't dry out. So you can roll this out by hand, or you can use one of these handy dandy Atlas machines. These can be a little bit pricey, but there are a lot of people who have these at home and they never use them, and they sell them on eBay and on Facebook Market, what have you. And you can pick them up for, between 50 and 60, 75% off. This Atlas machine retails for $80 or $90, and I picked it up on Facebook for $25. So it can be done, and you can get knockoffs that are made in China. I would recommend that you look closely and get the ones that are made in Italy. They're just a better made machine. So what I'm going to do is, with this machine, which is held on to my countertop with a C-clamp, and to use one of these, you'll start with the widest setting. If you look in closely here, you'll see that as I pull and turn this knob, these rollers will get closer together. And in most cases, the higher the number, the closer they are together. But we're going to start with the widest. I'm going to take this dough and I'm going to just press it out, and we're going to put it right in here, and it flattens it out. And then we'll gradually go thinner, thinner. This one goes all the way to 9 in terms of thinness. So it's getting thinner and thinner. And see, if this were wet, it would be getting all gummed up now, and it'd be really sticky. But because we had that couscous texture, we're able to get this pretty quickly to the thinnest setting without gumming up the works. There we go. There. And if it's dry, it's really easy to handle. It doesn't stick. It's pretty strong. What I'm doing right now is I'm working on getting a straight edge. So I folded that right in half. There's a straight edge. And I'm gonna fold this one, and we'll get a straight edge here. And this just makes it easier so that when I go to cut my pasta, I'll be able to get pasta about the same length. So on this side here, and this usually comes off, and and you just slide that right on. I have a fettuccine size, so a thicker, wider pasta, and this is a spaghetti, which is a thinner one. And I'm going to go with the thick one. So let's do this here. All right, and we'll just slide that right like that. We're gonna put that right through, and I have this special little gizmo here to catch it, catch the noodles as they come off. And there they are, fresh noodles. And what I can do is I can, with this rack, I can just let them there. You can cook this right away. You can also let it dry. And if you let it dry, you can then put it into a Ziploc bag, throw it in the refrigerator, throw it in the freezer, and you can make pasta in advance that way. But as you'll notice, it's pretty easy and pretty quick if you have kind of the right equipment to make the fresh pasta. I very seldom have leftover pasta. So let's make the spinach pasta. So we'll just kind of review the same thing here. So here's our spinach pasta. And I'll break off a golf ball size piece. Let me cover that back up. Again, just to keep it from drying out. We're going to set this to its widest setting again. There we go. And then we'll flatten that. Put that right through. Whoops, we'll have to move that over. There we go. So taking care of your pasta machine, you always want to make sure that you keep it dry. So don't let water anywhere near your machine. There's a fair amount of flour dust that is formed in using this, and if you get water on it, you're going to get flour and water, and when that dries, it turns into cement. And there are gears all in here, and if those gears get wet, what will happen is they will they'll get cemented, and you won't be able to use it. And you can't easily take these apart. So if you need to clean it, all you really want to do is kind of blow on it or shake it out, rather than trying to rinse it off. You could wipe it down with a damp cloth. That would be okay. But definitely don't be running water on it. So I'm just getting my straight edges here, just for fun. There we go. All right, we'll cut it. On this one, why don't we go with the skinny noodles? All right, so I'll just go in here like that. If you don't have this this fancy magic wand, you can use a chopstick or a knife blade just to kind of get that. So there you go. Spinach skinny noodles, fat plain noodles. Our water's boiling, so let's cook some up, because our sauce is just about ready. So this is a noodle strainer, and this is great if, like tonight, I'm going to be making individual servings. And because I don't want to have to dump the water out, I'll just use this. I'll put this right in here, like that. Okay, heavily salted. I'm gonna go with my fat noodles. I'll just pull those off. Now what's great about making your fresh noodles is it literally takes a minute to cook the fresh noodles. So what I'll do is I'll just take this edge. If this were a chopstick, I'd be doing it the same way. I'll put it in, and then I'm gonna give it, just for the first 5 seconds, I'm just gonna give it a little stir. And remember, what that does is it'll just keep those noodles from sticking together, because now their surface is sealed with the hot water. And we'll wait for a minute. So while I'm waiting for that, what I'll do is I'm going to get a bowl and a spoon. Let me take this off. There we go. This will be for the sauce. All right, is everyone looking at the timer? Has it been close to a minute yet? I think so. It's getting close. And the thinner noodles will actually take a little less time because they have more surface area exposed to the water. So these strainers, you can get these at IKEA, and I think they're between $4 and $5 for one. And they're designed so that in this regular size, in a large pot, you can fit 3 of them in. So if you wanted to take a look at those are kind of fun. All right, it's definitely been a minute, and I'm hungry. So let's grab this. Put that right in there. A little bit of vodka, bolognese, meat sauce. Okay, don't put in too much sauce because you want to be able to taste the pasta. There we go. Nice and thick. Again, that's with the pureed tomatoes. And I always like a little bit of cheese to go with mine. So we'll sprinkle some cheese on there. All right. Yum. Fresh pasta. Yum. All right, now I'd like to finish this, but I want to show you another kind of a fun thing. Well, it's a little bit spicy from those spicy noodles. So you'll notice that I have 2 different types of pasta here. I have the spinach pasta and I have the plain pasta. So one day I was making spinach and plain pasta noodles, and I was kind of mixing them together, and I wanted them to be evenly distributed, and I wanted it to look nice and balanced, and I just couldn't do it easily. So I came up with this idea: what if I could somehow combine the 2 colors so that they were exactly 50-50? And so what I came up with was a ball of plain and a ball of colored pasta. All right. And of course, this is very simple, but I was very proud of myself when I realized what I was doing. So what I'll do is I will roll out a ball of the green pasta, and I'll roll out the white pasta, And then I'll put them together and we'll roll them just like this. So now the thing to remember is I can't fold the edges now to get the straight edge. Because if I do that, then I'll be kind of mixing up the different sides of the pasta. There we go. So, plain spinach. We'll put this right through. Stick here. Look at that. So, remember, we can just cook this right away. We don't have to wait. Tilt it. Put it right in. Give it a stir. 3, 4, 5. There we go. So I'm going to show you one more thing while we're waiting for that to cook. So over here we have our vodka bolognese sauce, tomato sauce, and if I add some cream, or half and half, we will end up with a cream, tomato, and vodka sauce. And it's very, very smooth. Okay, that's not to say that the straight tomato sauce isn't great, but by adding a little bit of cream, what we do is you kind of take that tomato acidic edge off. And we end up with a really nice, smooth cream sauce. So let's take this. We'll drain in that. And look at this, I have an empty bowl here. So let's put that in there. And look at this. The red and, not the red, the green and the white noodles, they're evenly mixed up. And we'll take some of this yummy sauce here. And we'll sprinkle on some cheese. So there you have it. Yum. So there you have it. 2 types of pasta. Actually 3, because we got spinach, we've got the plain, and we also have the mix. And we have 2 types of sauces as well. So thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time.